right, so the
We're-
meeting is,
we're- Hang
it's
on,
live.
we're hooking to YouTube now, so hang on just a second.
It says it's now streaming live on YouTube. So are you ready to go?
Yep. It's 7 o'clock at the clock's dinging right now.
Awesome. All right, so I'll call the meeting to order. This is the Village of Victor Zoning Board meeting for June 17th of 2020. Obviously, we're doing it via Zoom. The next item on the agenda is a salute to the flag. So we still stand up, and actually, I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, because if we all say it, then it echoes. So bear with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of minutes of the January 15th, 2020 meeting. Is there any discussion that needs to be had on those minutes?
I have nothing to say.
No.
No.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. Motion accepted. So moving right along to item number 4 on our agenda is 212 East Main Street, Mike Fink. First thing I'll do is I'll read the legal notice into the record. It says a public hearing will be held before the Village of Victor Zoning Board of Appeals remotely via the Zoom app and can be viewed on the Village YouTube channel on Wednesday, June 17th, 2020 at 7 p.m. to consider the following. Number 1, the application of 212 East Main Street, Mike Fink, for an area variance to the Village of Victor zoning code to allow the construction of a fence over 6 feet tall in order to keep deer out of his garden. The applicant proposes building a 7.5 foot tall wooden fence in a Hampton-style diamond pattern on the lower back half of his lot. A variance of 1.5 feet is needed to comply with the 6 foot high fence code. At this time, the general public cannot be present in person at the public hearings, but can comment via the Village of Victor YouTube channel, which can be found at thevillageofvictor.org under Village of Victor virtual meetings on YouTube. Other ways to comment are via email at the ptclerk@thevillageofvictor.org or via US mail to 60 East Main Street, Victor, New York 14564. Comments can also be submitted to our mailbox located at the Village Hall. If you have any questions, please call 924-3311. It's on behalf of Sean Sanderson, the chairperson of the Village of Victor Zoning Board of Appeals. The next item I will read is into the record is a referral comments from the Village of Victor Code Enforcement Officer. It's in regards to the Zoning Board of Appeals on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. This is regarding Mike Fink's area variance. It says the Planning and Building Department has received an application for an area variance. The property is located at 212 East Main. The applicant is proposing to construct a garden fence around their vegetable garden in the rear portion of their parcel. The parcel is located in the R1 Family Residential District. I reviewed the plans and have the following comments. The comments are simply that the applicant is proposing to install a 7.5 foot tall fence, whereas 170-36.c allows a maximum height of 6 feet, This is respectfully submitted, Martin Avia, who is our current code enforcement officer that we're using from the town. It does reference the section, I'll just read it, 170-36 fences and hedges. And it says regulations regarding fences and or hedges not applicable to farm boundary lines shall be as follows. No fence shall be over 6 feet in height from grade and shall not be built nearer to the street than the front line of the principal building. All right. Mr. Fink, or is it Dr. Fink? I'm sorry.
Either is fine.
Yeah. So bear with us as this is our first Zoom meeting, but if you want to just kind of casually go over what you're hoping to do and kind of why, and We all have in front of us the couple of drawings that you can refer to and just kind of give us in a nutshell where we're at.
Certainly. Yeah, so I appreciate your time here tonight. So I live right off of Main Street in the Victor on the east side. My backyard is a narrow, long lot. When I moved in, there was a garden fence constructed of like a chain link. It's about between 4 and 5 feet tall, and planted a garden. And the deer let me know their presence shortly after. That was a few years ago. We had babies, some time passed. And then this year, with some time off of work, I wanted to construct a garden fence that would keep the deer out. Did my research and found that it must be over 7 feet tall to assure that deer will not jump over the fence. The deer activity is pretty high back there, which is, we see deer almost on a daily basis kind of back. There's woods behind the property. It's basically, if it was a straight shot back, the Victor Municipal Park is probably several hundred feet back from there, but it's wooded. The diamond pattern that you see in front of you is the pattern in which I'm following for the fence. And I was planning on doing 7.5 feet to assure that the deer would not jump the fence. As far as the specifications, the fence is 200 feet back from the road, 120 feet back from the rear part of the residence, and is 1 foot back from the property line between me and the adjacent property. The fence is not viewed from the residence either to the right or the left, and there's no residence directly behind the fence that would be viewing that would have view toward the fence. It is completely constructed of wood. The requirement is that you don't use any metal or like garden or farm-like metal wire mesh or anything. So I found a clear mesh to use for the walls to abide by that. And it certainly is, the goal is to keep it aesthetically pleasing and to add value to the property and the residents. So I'm hopeful that we can, within all those guidelines and boundaries, we can get this passed so we can have a deer-free garden environment there.
Sure.
So
Thank
the
you.
mesh you're using is plastic?
I believe it. So I would assume it's plastic, some kind of synthetic plastic type material that is actually technically a bird netting. So it's a clear mesh that you can't see through.
Okay.
Yeah, I stopped down there today. I would, for lack of a better description, it's plastic.
Yeah,
You know,
thank you.
it's not wire, chicken wire, anything like that. It's a plastic netting. So is there anyone else does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? I mean, obviously the fence is going to be 7.5 feet high. The code allows for 6 feet.
Sean, the photograph that you sent, third photo down where it's way in the back behind some trees. Where was that photograph taken from? Was that from the street?
Yeah, and I think I've shared those, and David, I'll share them with you. And I don't know that I have your cell phone number, but I was there today and I snapped a couple photos and I shared them each separately to these guys. And yeah, so it's almost to the street. So I walked in about, I would say 10 yards off the sidewalk and was standing, still in the neighbor's yard looking into the back. And I wanted to take that picture because I wanted to really illustrate that you really cannot see this at all from Main Street, unless, I mean, you get a glimpse of it when you're driving by, but it's tucked back in there behind their house and behind a bunch of other plantings. Not Mike Crowley, but Mike Fink, can you share with me again I think you shared there was an email that you sent out. So we're gonna have to know exactly where this garden is located.
Sure.
And then we're gonna have to make sure that it's exactly the exact dimensions of the garden.
Okay.
So those are, I think I saw that it was 20, somewhere that in an email that it was 20 by 30. I don't see it on the application, but is the garden in the fenced in area actually 20 by 30?
That is roughly, yes, give or take some inches.
Okay. And then how about the distance that we talked about from, because in the site plan, and Pam, can you put that back up, the site plan on the screen? Sorry, I caught you off guard there. So in the site plan, it shows that you highlight an area, just kind of the general area,
Yeah.
that it's in the, I would call that the southeast corner of the property. And I would say that it's on that side of your property, but it's definitely not on the rear property line, or it's not, and it's a foot or two off the side property line.
Sure.
So did you have the dimensions for how far off of the rear property line it is, or do you just have it from the front?
I only have it from the front. To be honest, I guess I haven't, what we're looking at right here, I'm not familiar with reading those, and it was honestly tough to read some of that. So I don't
Sure.
know exactly where my rear property line is. There's a shed that is on my property that's actually even beyond this picture. I've never received a map that contains the full back part of the property. But essentially what I do have is that from the front of the property, there's 200 feet back from the road and 120 feet back from the rear part of the home on the property.
So it shows you, if I'm reading this correctly, it shows your lot line on that side of the house, on this east side of your house is 312 feet total. So if it's 200 feet from the street, then it's starting 112 feet from the rear property line. My question is, because if this variance gets granted, I'm comfortable with where you have it located,
Okay.
but I don't want to be able to let you have a 7.5 foot fence anywhere you want it on that property. Like I don't want it to be even with your house or on the other side by your neighbors or things like that. I do like where it is, and it makes sense where it is, but we have to find some way to locate that. We can't just say you can have a 7.5 foot fence and you can have it anywhere you want.
Sure. So I don't know if this is helpful. I sent that email out earlier that basically had the specifications being the distance from the road, the distance from the back part of the home, the fact that you can't, the fence must not be viewed from either the neighboring residence. It must be completely made of wood, aesthetically pleasing, and must be on the rear part of the property. That was kind of, because I had the same thought that you certainly don't want someone constructing a 7.5 foot garden fence, 10 feet back from the road next to their home. What else would you like to, how else would you like to delineate it from there?
Yeah, we just have to locate, we just have to locate where it is and say that you can, it's okay at its current location. But
Okay.
that has to be that it's, approximately 1.5 foot off of the, your south, or I guess that's the east property line, and no closer than 1.5 foot from the east property line, and no closer than, whatever it is, 20 feet off of the back property line.
Okay.
Sean, how do we grant any motion without an understanding of how far it is off the back property line? Is it 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet? Does it encroach on the neighbor? I'm not clear on that.
I'm sorry, say it again.
How do we grant any motion without an understanding of how far this fence is off the back property line?
Right.
I think that speaks to what you're asking. Is it on the property line? Is it 2 feet away? Is it 2 feet encroaching? It's not clear from the survey what we're looking at.
Right. And that's exactly what I'm asking is, and trying to get to that is where, because that, I assume that this yellow blob on here was supposed to be a kind of a general idea on where the garden is. And it's
Correct.
not exactly where it is.
Well, look, can I ask, does it matter if it's pre-existing? If we're granting a variance and we're comfortable that it's 100% on his property, can we just say that it, grant it based on the current position of the existing fence?
How are you 100% comfortable it's on his property?
I'm not. I'm not. But I'm saying if we were.
Well, I mean, that's really for code enforcement. I mean, obviously it has to be on, he can't build a fence on someone else's property, and nor do we don't have we can't let him do that. So, I do think there would be some, where I would be okay is if it's no closer than, I mean, what did you say, Dr. Fink? You said it's 1.5 feet off the property line, or
1.5
What's
feet
it-
on the east side, and then as far as just 200 feet back from, I guess, the front part. And if we use it 12 and subtract 200 and then 30 feet, and that would give us kind of the rear line, if that's accurate there, the 312.
Can't the motion just simply say, per current code regulations? And want to spell it out on the lot line, which is allowed, and just call it?
Yeah, what we want to avoid is or what I want to avoid is granting a variance that would allow the next owner to have a fence around a 7.5 foot fence around his entire backyard. So I want to allow him to have this 7.5 foot garden fence enclosure around his garden, but I don't want to allow him or anyone else that owns the house after him to have a 7.5 foot fence that closes his entire back of his yard.
Well, it's spelled out in the dimensions of the actual garden, correct?
Well, it's a 20 by 30 foot, garden enclosure fence.
On the lot line in accordance with code regulations. Because the variance is not for setback. The variance is for height, right?
Correct. So I guess I don't understand what we're saying different.
Or we're looking for language. So we're approving nothing more than 20 by 30 in a specific area on the lot line, which is in accordance with current code regulations.
I think the question is how you define that specific area. When
It says,
to the side and 20 feet to the back.
But
No.
what is, help me out with northeast, southwest, when I'm looking at, this is the way this is depicted, it's in the bottom left-hand quadrant. So is that north or southwest or southeast?
Southeast, yeah.
East, yeah.
But what I'm saying, Tim, is as it's depicted on this site plan is not accurate. So we can't refer to the site plan. We
Oh.
can say 20 by 30 foot garden as, requested, garden fence as requested, but you can't say as depicted in the attached site plan because it's not depicted correctly. And then I don't want him to have to move it either. So I don't care if we say it's okay to be on the lot line, if everyone's okay that it's on that southeast lot line. But we have to put something in it where it says no closer than 200 feet from the front lot line and no closer than 30 feet to the rear lot line. And then it would be whatever that distance is. Assuming we want to restrict him like that, where you want to say this is the size of the garden that we're the fence or garden enclosure that we're comfortable with, and that he can never expand it, because that's really what we're talking about. Is we're okay with how it looks now, but if you want to change it, you can't.
I go back to, and he can always resubmit a site plan. I guess my whole point is that we know the dimensions of the garden approximately. We're approving it based on the fact that, based on the approval is based on that it's on his property in accordance with current code regulations. So if he wants to put it on the property line, well, that's allowed. If they find out that it's 1.5 feet over, when he's getting is he required to get a permit for this?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if the permit shows that, he submits a survey, I guess, and if the permit shows that he's encroaching, then that will be resolved, correct?
We don't want it all the way to the right side, because that could be some other neighbor.
So help
When you
me out. Where exactly is it? How far off is this highlighted area from where it actually is?
I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, that's what we're trying. So it's in the general, that's in the same right general area. So if you were to move that whole left, that highlighted blob, you'd move it towards the street by about that whole thing, move that whole thing, flip it over. It's that much closer to the street. Like, it's not in the corner. It's kind of in the middle of his backyard. There's 30 feet behind it to the lot line. And then there's how many feet to the house, Mike?
120.
There's 120 to the house. Maybe,
So-
maybe that's how.
82 from the back line.
So it's 82 feet from the rear, 120 from the house, but the house can change dimensions. The lot, so it's 200 from the front and 82 from the rear. And then we don't know exactly how far it is off of the southeast lot line. That you're saying it's roughly 1.5 feet, but if we said 1 foot off of the line, is that, we're sure it's 1 foot off? I mean, I don't want to say it's got to be 1.5 feet off the line and have it really be 1 foot off the line, because then you got to move it.
Yeah, it was visualized based on the lot line that I know of. So to be conservative, we could say 1 foot off.
So then it would be a 20 by 30 foot garden fence, 1 foot off the side lot line, the southeast lot line, 82 feet off the rear lot line, and 200 feet off of the front lot line. Then we have an exact location for it. The only thing is, Michael, is that limits you that this garden has to be this size from now until you ever go back for another variant. I mean, do you see yourself wanting a larger garden, or, this is your first attempt at a garden, I think, and I just don't want to pigeonhole you if you to say, okay, this is the garden that this fence and this garden is the size you can have, because we're allowing you to go 7.5 feet high, or potentially allowing you to.
Yeah, there was a garden present before that, and so that was kind of first attempt. Given the amount of cutting and detail in the garden, I have no plans to change it, given the amount of work that went into it.
Hey, Mike Crowley, can you hear me?
Yep,
Mr. Crowley?
yep.
What? For some reason, what is this? How would a special use apply to this instead of an area variance?
So, okay, so I've been thinking about your application since I read it, and Mr. Fink, correct me if I'm wrong, you own the lot where we moved the line for your driveway, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm relatively familiar with the lot. I grew up 2 houses away.
Oh, cool.
So, I don't think it's a variance because I don't think it's a fence. I think the code enforcement officer has come across something he's never saw before. So a fence, in what the code means for a fence is to separate 2 things. That's what a fence does. And this is a rectangular enclosure. You know, so in my feeling, I think if you made it a special use permit, because here's your, gentlemen, here's your problem. If you give them, I think it's 7.5 feet, is that the height?
Correct.
So if you give them, so, and that's your task, right? Your task is the height.
Correct.
So if you give them 7.5 feet, the next owner can build a 7.5 feet wooden stockade rectangular construction in their
You have to
backyard.
be able to see through it.
That's true.
No, you don't.
Yes, you do. It's in the code.
Oh, well, I guarantee you, I can't see through that one. And it's
It's
got.
not 7.5 feet tall.
Oh, yes, it is.
Then that doesn't fit the code. Tell the code enforcement officer.
So,
So how would a special use? I mean, I'm not sold that it's not a fence, but how does a special use permit? How would that be different than granting a variance and then an area variance?
well, the special use permit always has a time attached to it. So you can call it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 1 year. And then the owner has to come and get it renewed. So,
Yeah.
you know, but that way it can be, because to me, it's a protection for his garden, right? I mean, that's what it is. I think it's aesthetically pleasing. I think it looks well, but the next owner's fence might not look as nice.
Well, and actually, I was thinking about that, but I think we can put restriction. I mean, we could say this exact fence with this exact design and this exact materials is allowed, but we can't. But a chain link fence or a wooden stockade fence or anything like that beyond that's not this.
I agree.
And I forget what he refers to it as.
Hampton style diamond pattern.
Yeah, that this exact fence is allowed, but if the fence changes from this exact fence to chain link, or it changes to stockade, or it changes to vinyl,
Or location.
or the location, then you have to go back to get a permit, and it has to meet the code. It has to be 6 feet high and not, and not chicken wire and not all those things. Because
But Sean,
do
how
think
do we reference a location if we don't know where it's located now? That's what I'm struggling with.
Well, if we have rough dimensions, we can say no more than, no less than.
I agree.
I always go back to, if you can get it approximate and make it within code, that should be good enough. And any
I
amendments
completely-
to that should be, he'd have to come back.
Do we know approximate though?
yeah, that's what we were just doing. It's approximately 200 feet from the front lot line, and then it's 82 feet from the rear lot line, and it's 1 foot from the southeast side lot line. And in that location, it's 20 by 30. It's 7.5 foot tall. It's this Hampton diamond pattern made out of wood.
Sean, I cut
Without-
out for a little while. It's 82 feet from the rear lot line?
Correct.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. I thought it was on.
So
The
that's
rear
why
lot.
that's what I'm saying, is that drawing, that site plan looks like it's on the side lot line and the rear, and it's not on the side and the rear.
Okay.
It's tucked back in the rear of his property, but it's not on the lines.
You can build a fence, but I can't color a picture.
Yeah. I mean, we do have to be specific,
Mhm.
so we can't, we have to give exact numbers. So that's why I was saying, if we say comfortably, if it's not to be any closer than 1 foot from the southeast lot line, if it's 80 feet from the rear lot line and 200, like, I don't want it to be any closer than that. So I just want to be conservatively how far off the lot line before we screw you by saying, oh, it's too close. So,
I agree.
Okay,
All right.
I gotta ask a question if I may.
Sure.
Where are you getting what the fence can't be made out of?
And the code.
170-36.
Yeah, so 170-36 tells you that you can't build chicken wire, barbed wire, or other farm type wires.
Yeah, right.
That's correct.
But you can build a solid fence.
Correct.
Somewhere it says you have to be able to see through it. Is that A or B?
Right. So that's why I'm saying we need to be specific about what materials we allow it to be built out of, because it can't be only a couple things, but it could be made out of stockade wood. It could be made out of, if we just give him a variance for 7.5 feet and we don't put any restrictions on it, then he can build it out of anything he wants, as long as it's not chicken wire,
I don't
or,
think you have the power to do that. But that's all right. I don't think you have any other power other than the height of the fence.
Well, materials are, certain materials, you just listed them, are strictly prohibited unless, we grant a variance for those materials.
Correct.
And this mesh sounds like it meets the definition, which gets us back to the one and only variance he's seeking right now, which is the height.
Correct.
And we're not allowing him to build a stockade, 7.5 foot tall stockade fence. Well, as Sean said, it's specific to the pattern, the materials, and we're trying to get to a location. And that, in my mind, that should get us home.
And I won't say anything after this, but here's what you gentlemen need to understand. If you allow 7.5 feet, you allow it based on any acceptable fence material. That's how it works.
I think that's what I was saying, Michael, but not if we put on conditions.
I don't think you have the power to put on a condition. I think that would be like telling somebody, like, I mean, that's that sound thing we did with the guy with the stone cutter years ago.
Right.
I can't tell the guy when he can cut stone. I think your variance application is for the height. I don't think it gives you the power to adjust the material.
We don't need to adjust the materials because it can't be chain link fence, or it can't be barbed wire, it can't be chicken wire, and it has to be see-through. It's all in the code.
See, now my question on that is that only on fences that are on the lot line? You're telling me you can't have chicken wire on a chicken coop?
Unless it's in farmland. That's a different code.
Yeah, so again, this is why we have laws and this is why they're interpreted and why we have courts, but that's not my interpretation when I read this. So, but like I said, remember your application is to the height. And whatever height you grant goes with that. If you grant a variance, goes with that property forever.
But the height has to include where he's putting it, because, I mean, if you're imposing on a neighbor, we don't want that.
Correct. You can, and where he's putting it is where the application is, right? So if you thought the application was imposing, then you could ask him to adjust it, right? What's more feasible?
Right. We're just trying to nail down where it is.
Right.
Dr. Fink, are you at the property now?
Yes,
Got a tape measure?
yes.
I'm willing to wait.
What do you want? I mean, I think he knows where it is,
I
right?
measured it last night relative to the distance from the home and the road.
I'm interested in the side setback or the side property line. I
So
think
that's
I think that's where everybody's issue is right now, because if we take the front edge is 200 off the front, okay, we can extrapolate the distance from the back. You're fine. The question is that side, and if
Well, I think he said he measured it at 1.5 feet, and he's 100% confident that it's no closer than a foot.
There's a fence existing on that property line that extends probably from the home, probably back. If it's 120 feet to the garden, it probably extends about 80 feet back and then stops. So that fence is back from my property line, and I lined it up with that fence. So the property line down there is not marked, but it is in line with the fence on that side of the property.
okay,
Sorry, was that clear?
Well,
it is.
Okay.
You realize though, if we give you a foot and code enforcement comes out and figures out that it's 11 inches, we got a problem.
Right. Well, I mean, actually, does anyone on the board have a problem with it if that on that side of it, it's on the property line? I mean,
Doesn't meet current code.
fences are allowed on the property line. So,
If that helps, there was a fence here existing that was a chain link fence, which was actually against code when I moved in. I'm actually replacing that fence with this.
yeah, we're just not confident that fence, the existing fence, is on the property line or off the property line. I mean, we've seen dozens of fences that were put up over the years that aren't where there's, on you just kind of, someone put them up and they're just there,
There.
It doesn't mean that that's really the property line.
Well, I appreciate your concern relative to making sure that it doesn't come back to haunt me here. If you're allowed to put a fence on the property line, if we want to be conservative, why don't we just say it's, on that property line, give the specifications front or back, the dimensions of it, and be conservative there.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I
Does the
agree
board have
too.
any other thoughts on that?
I'm fine with that,
It's good.
as long as I don't have to word the motion.
You mean you don't have it done yet? So, Mike, we're required to go through this balancing test, which you did fill out as part of the application. Actually, before I do that, Rosanna, I believe we had a letter or an email sent to us from.
Yes.
I don't have it in my packet and I don't have it handy. Can you read it into the record?
Open the public hearing.
Yes,
Or-
I'm opening the public hearing.
Okay. This letter was received from Sarah Farney and Sarah Mack, actually. We received the note, Mike Fink's fence variance request. I just wanted to say, as another home on East Main Street, we request and hope it will be approved. We also hope it keeps his garden protected. Sarah Mack, 45 East Main.
Did we receive any other emails or correspondence?
No.
Pam?
We can receive some from the Zoom, but Pam would know
No,
nothing.
All right, then I'll close the public portion. Then we're gonna go through the balancing test. So item 1 on the balancing test is, can the benefit sought by the applicant be achieved by other feasible means?
Oh, because discharge of firearms in the village is illegal. Got to keep the deer out of the garden.
I like it.
I don't think there can be.
I agree.
I agree.
Agreed.
Agreed. Will the granting of the area variance produce an undesirable change in the characteristic of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties?
I don't
No.
believe so, based on where it's located. I could hardly see it in that photo.
I agree.
Yeah, it's tucked back down there, and it is really nicely done. I think it's, if anything, it's an improvement.
Thank you.
Is the requested variance substantial?
I don't believe so. It's 1.5 feet compared to 6.
Yeah,
Less than a third.
Agreed.
yeah, and I agree, and I agree because how far away it is from the street, the neighbors, the line of sight for anyone that would be a 1.5 feet would be very hard to notice.
Sean, I would agree. You mentioned sight lines. I think given the location, 80 feet off the back line, 300 feet or 200 feet from the front line. I agree.
I agree.
Will the variance have any adverse physical or environmental effects on the neighborhood or district?
No,
No.
Nope.
No. And then was the alleged
Transmit
difficulties?
light.
I'm sorry?
As long as it transmits light like it says, correct? I don't think it does.
Noted. And then it says, was the alleged difficulties self-created?
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
I do like his answer though, that says it was not self-created because the wildlife in the neighborhood, they created the problem, not him. But so
There's a herd back there, guys.
But is the fence fully constructed?
it is.
Then that we'd call that the definition of self-created, but doesn't necessarily mean that you have to tear it down either. So
Fair.
All right. Does the board have any other questions, or is there someone that would like to make a motion?
Brandon, you're our man.
I actually had to call in from my phone and I can't read Roseanne's comments that she sent out. So if anybody else is able, that would be greatly appreciated. I had really bad connection problems.
same.
Brian, you want to try to work through this?
Well, let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
David?
I'm trying to look at it now.
Okay.
Does somebody have the distances that we referenced? I think that would help.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to add those in there. So
Dave, do you have that email?
Yeah, I can read it without the distances.
Okay.
We can.
okay.
It says, "Now it be resolved that the application of Mike Fink to allow the construction of a 7.5 foot tall fence in order to keep the deer out of his garden." Then we got to put in a location, I think, here.
Yeah, I to put something together, a little small thing together here. It says, I move to grant an area variance to the Village of Victor zoning code to allow the construction of a 20-foot by 30-foot, 7.5 foot high wooden fence at 212 East Main Street. And it says the fence must be constructed of wood in the Hampton diamond style pattern as shown in the submitted picture. What I'm trying to figure out, David, to your point, is how to say that that netting must be there.
I mean, the code just says it has to allow visible light, meaning it can't be solid.
Well,
About constructed of
call it-
materials.
But I want to go beyond that because the code does allow for like a stockade fence because it lets light through the stockade pieces, you know, like that's, so I want it to be, I want to allow the fence that he has there, but I don't want to allow, like what Mr. Crowley was worried about, a 7.5 foot tall stockade fence or a 7.5 foot tall chain link fence, because that lets light through it, but I don't like it. I like the way that, you know, in this Hampton style diamond pattern is shown in the attached picture, but I don't know how to say with netting in between the
Right.
joists, or I mean, they're not joists, or the rails.
Why does it have to have netting?
Have to have netting.
Then
I just don't want him to be able to fill that in. You know what I mean? I don't want him to be able to fill in those sections that are netting. I don't want him to be able to fill that in with something opaque.
wine
You know, I want
bottles.
him to be,
Why don't we just define it as what it is today?
well, because then how does the next home,
You
that
start
this can go.
to using plastic mesh netting, and that's all you have to say.
Well,
right?
because what if he wants to change it to a regular netting, or he wants to put in like a plexiglass, you know, a clear see-through plexiglass, like,
Then he has to come back.
well, what if this plastic netting, you know, because I mean, a net is made
Or how
out
about,
of,
this? How about plastic mesh netting as depicted in the applicants or the application or any other material that conforms to code?
no, because he could put a stockade fence there, because that conforms to code.
But is it a diamond shaped Hampton style stockade fence?
Well, you could put up a diamond style Hampton diamond style fence with plywood in between the middle of it, you know, like.
Then it wouldn't let light through,
Potentially, right.
which violates the code.
I just think that is that is too vague.
I don't know how to word it.
I say you define it as it's depicted or as it sits today.
Can you put up that, Pam, can you put up the drawing that, or the picture of that fence that? So I think everyone understands what I'm trying to say is that I don't want him to fill in those diamonds with something that's,
So Sean, why can't we say as depicted in Exhibit A with materials in compliance with code?
we can.
Because if
well,
he fills it in with stockade fence, then clearly it's not in compliance with Exhibit
No.
A.
yeah, I just want to make sure that if you guys all think that that's fine and that protects us from him building a 7.5 foot stockade fence, or from the next owner building a 7.5 foot stockade fence. I just want something in there to prevent that from happening, from him just being able to build a 20 foot by 30 foot, 7.5 foot wide wooden box.
Honestly, I think if he were to come to us, given the location of this fence, with a request to build a 7.5 foot stockade fence, I think we would generally support that. I'm not going to go on record and say that, but it's not on a lot line. It doesn't border a property. It doesn't interfere with sight lines. I think what he's building is a very attractive fence, as long as it's in compliance with what's attached and
Okay.
in compliance with materials required in the code. I'm okay with that.
David, Brian, Tim?
Same.
I
Agreed.
agree. I'd be fine with it.
I
So
mean,
you
the
said the
key is
fence
it
must
has
be-
to allow visible light. That's the key to me, anyway.
Roseanne, the only thing I would mention is exclude to keep deer out. I don't think we need to define a purpose of the fence. I don't
Right.
think that's necessary for this.
So I move to grant an area variance to the Village of Victor zoning code to allow the construction of a 20-foot by 30-foot by 7.5-foot high wooden fence at 212 East Main Street. The fence must be constructed of wood in a Hampton-style diamond pattern as shown in the attached picture. Fence must be made, do we have to say that made of, I mean, obviously it's gonna be made of stuff allowed by the code.
Not obviously if he's gonna change it. Yeah, that's how we're protecting future.
Materials constructed of, fence constructed of materials as allowed by the village code. And then insert distances
Cam,
To be
Roseanne, do you have that?
to be located.
Because I think we want to get rid of that. Fence must be constructed in a Hampton-style diamond pattern as shown in the attached picture of materials, whatever Brendan just said. What is that?
That's not my yard. Correct.
I like, is that your bridge? So,
That's next.
and then you say the fence must be located in
No
the
closer than.
Fence must be located in the southeast corner of the property, no closer than, it's, you want to, is it 82 for sure, or do you want to say 80, Michael?
Let's say 80.
80, no closer than 80 feet from the rear lot line.
Yep.
And no closer than 200 feet to the front.
Do we have to go with the front? I
Yeah,
would
otherwise
do
you can
back
put-
and side.
I'm sorry?
I would do back and side.
Right, you've already put it at 20 by 30.
Well, I like front.
Yeah, I want to have the
I
front.
think we
'cause
should include front.
I don't want it to be close enough to this. Yeah, we have to. Because I don't want it to be close enough to the street, any closer to the street to allow it to be seen.
Okay.
I agree.
I get it. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's your job. So no closer than 80 feet to the rear lot line and no closer than 200 feet from lot line. And then we have to say somehow on the southeast lot line. Because right now, I think we have to say on the south, directly on the southeast lot line, no closer than 80 on the southeast lot line, no closer than 80 feet to the rear, and no closer than. That's and a 20 by 30 means he can't go all the way across his yard.
Sean, do we want to include to be constructed within 2 months or something like that? Typically, we have a time requirement in there.
Yeah,
6
I think
months.
Well, if it's already there, do we need to?
I don't know.
Isn't that permit related?
Say that again.
Wouldn't the building permit identify the timeline?
I know we have in the past done it.
Yeah, I think we should.
It's already there.
I think he's got to get. He's got to get a permit.
Looks like Sean froze.
There he is.
Hey, he's back,
Hi, Sean.
maybe.
Maybe it's a Latchmere Drive connection issue.
Yeah, he probably doesn't have green light yet.
We're back.
Roseanne, do you want to read to us what you have so far?
Okay. Now therefore be it resolved that the application of Mike Fink to allow the construction of a 20-foot by 30-foot, 7.5-foot tall fence. The applicant the fence must be constructed of wood, Hampton-style diamond pattern on the southeast lot line, no closer than 80 feet from the rear and no closer than 200 feet to the front lot line.
Mhm.
I think you want to say as illustrated in whatever exhibit A or whatever you make that.
Yep, okay. You don't want a time frame then?
I think we should put a time frame on it, because that forces him to get a permit. Right, this is already existing. I mean, a time limit doesn't really make sense, it's already built. But does that force him to go get the permit?
Did he already get a permit?
Like,
Apply for
No.
the permit? No?
I requested,
What?
and that's why we're here.
denied.
Why don't we
Yeah.
just say, applicant should obtain a building permit within 90 days of this approval?
Well, at this point, it doesn't matter because
Well, it does. He still
let's
needs to
put
get-
it in there to
he
move
still
this
needs
thing
to
down the
building
road.
permit.
And
Yeah, I'm
I would
fine with that.
imagine that he's gonna, stop right down and get his permit tomorrow.
Yep, well, let's put it in there. Is there someone that would like to make this motion?
I'll make the motion. If Joanne will read it. I will make the motion that Joanne is about to read.
Who's Joanne?
I'm sorry, Roseanne. I don't know. It's one of
I
those
don't know, Joe.
days, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, now therefore be it resolved that the application of Mike Fink to allow the construction of a 20-foot by 30-foot by 7.5-foot tall fence at 212 East Main Street. The fence must be constructed of wood in a Hampton-style diamond pattern, no closer than 80, at the southeast lot, no closer than 80 from the rear and no closer than 200 feet to the front lot, as illustrated in Exhibit A. Applicant should obtain a building permit within 60 days. Date.
Yeah, I like it. And the only thing I would add is that we wanted to say like 20-foot wide by 30-foot long by 7.5-foot high. Just because that's how it is. That's just the actual dimensions of the.
Okay,
You can add that.
yep,
Roseanne, I'll second that motion.
okay.
Sorry,
All in
Joanne.
favor?
Joanne,
Aye.
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 Brian?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Congratulations, Dr. Fink.
Thank you.
Go get your permit. Joanne will tell you what you have to
village
do
hall.
next.
The village hall open.
By the way, opening a farm market in the front yard is not, you're gonna need another variance for that.
I can walk down to the one in the village. It's all good.
So I think he's asking, is the village open?
yes,
All right.
Yeah, you have to go in and you have to wear a mask.
you, what will happen is I'll send you a letter. And I'll give your building permit application back to the code enforcement officer in the building department, and he'll issue it, and when it's ready, we'll call you and we'll arrange to have you pick it up.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone, thank you so much. Sorry it took so long, but I felt like we had to iron some of that stuff out. So
Motion to adjourn?
you making that motion, Brendan?
I am.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
So Roseanne, was I calling you Joanne all night?
No, just towards the end.
Okay. Long day. Sorry.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah, you're welcome.